and take it very seriously that you are interviewing your advisor and screening your advisor just as much as your advisor and the university you're interested in will do the same for you. In that way, you can spend a lot of time carefully figuring out, who do I want to work with that's going to help me get toward the specialization that I'm interested in? What are they like? Are they a personality fit for me? Are they going to be okay with somebody who has very, very divergent views, perhaps from them? And you'll find professors like that. Truthfully, you will find professors like that, and that's great. This is going to be a little different, because there was an interesting piece I saw posted on the Heterodox STEM Substack, and it dawned on me reading it that it might be a good opportunity for a video to address a few points of advice. Those of you who know on this channel, have been on this channel long enough, know that I work on climate related things in my professional capacity, and got my PhDs a little over 6 years ago. And so it's it's interesting, thinking back on it and thinking, what kind of advice might have I given to myself, or given to another, or what advice might I give to other students now? And so I saw this. It's an anonymous post on the Heterodox STEM Substack from an undergraduate student. Dear Heterodox community, I am an undergraduate. Why won't it scroll? You'll have to pardon, I had to take a moment because this is actually such a short letter here from this undergraduate student that I needed to readjust a little bit on the construction here, so it would actually be readable here on the screen entirely, because it would not, OBS was cutting things off, so we would just go with that right now. So, dear Heterodox community, I'm an undergraduate STEM student in earnest need of advice. I will be applying to graduate school this fall. As we all know too well, the modern academe enforces ideological purity. This is old news. However, I refuse acquiescence. I love research and can't imagine not doing a PhD. That said, how does one find an advisor who embraces free speech and diversity of thought? I have the feeling that there are many out there who secretly detest the modern trends in academia. Is there a secret sign or handshake I can use to let them know, quote, I'm one of us, or do I outrightly express my views to him or her? I'd like to avoid unnecessary enemies and find a supportive advisor. I don't want to spend 5 years feeling like I'm in hiding. Well, just to make one point, if you're going after a STEM PhD, ultimately, you're going to be doing it for longer than 5 years. I had a short one doing masters and PhDs, and master and PhD, I should say, to pretty much one right after the other. I didn't start one immediately after the other. I had about a 6-month separation, but I went from 2009 to the end of 2016. So 7 years. And mine might be considered relatively short. So you might be running longer than 5 years. 5 years is a very minimum, I think, if you're getting a PhD in a STEM field. I worry even my attitudes towards science may be off-putting. I miss the old days when scientists were allowed to be masculine, ambitious, competitive, speak their mind, rogue, and free. I'm lucky to have found my current mentor. He calls out my BS. If I think he's in the wrong, I tell him to get off my ass. Our relationship is actually very respectful, but always being nice doesn't cut it. I remember expressing to a prior mentor my desire to compete and win best poster. I could sense the dismay. Thank you for your time. Any and all input is welcome. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Um, you're not being paranoid. Though it might be a question of what do you mean exactly by enforcing ideological purity. Um, but I don't think you're right. I don't think you're wrong to be concerned about it for sure, because, you know, just even the campus expression survey, which I covered not too long ago on this channel, you had the it was about 60% of students that expressed reluctance to talk about anything. And of those who expressed reluctance, it was a very similar percentage. I think it was actually even larger. I think it was like 66%, if I remember correctly. It's back in the other video, that was concerned primarily of what their peers would do. And admittedly, this is a fair concern when you're thinking about, STEM career, long term kind of thing, and that jazz, because, you know, some of these folks may be your coworkers, and some of these folks may be your boss at some point. And yes, there is a certain amount of freedom if you're going after a PhD to come to the point where you're writing proposals and what have you, that you're bringing in money that you can be your own boss. Because it's one of the things universities like very much is the professors who can bring in the big dollar research grants. Because let us remember one thing with the grants that professors get: a certain portion of that grant is taken up in indirect costs, which goes right into the pockets of the university. I think at Yale and Harvard, for instance, it's something like 75% of the grant actually goes into the coffers of the university itself, to pay for indirect costs, which has to do, with facilities maintenance, IT, all those kinds of things that you need on a modern university campus, and particularly in STEM fields, because let's face it, if you're doing STEM, you're at this point doing an awful lot of computing at the same time, because most anything in a STEM field has to deal with intense amounts of mathematics and statistics at the same time. Or, you may be working in a chem lab too. That might be the other thing. This is one thing it's to some degree, it is difficult to say exact advice because I don't know your major. But there are some generic things here, and some of it I think has been said in the comments, so I'm going to try to avoid it, but I'm going a little off of memory. Try to avoid repeating others, but going a little off of memory. But you're not wrong, I don't think, to be concerned about that. And that said, I have found that there are professors and faculty that you can talk with and work with that will have wildly different opinions from you and yet still be okay with it. There are still those that exist. And in that case, it may take just talking. Just talking with folks and figuring it out. That's totally what it is. And you're already in the right mindset, I think, because if this is one thing, is just like, don't just go with the school. Go with the advisor, because if it's a good advisor, they're going to have your back when the school does something screwy. If the university, the college, the department that you're in screws something up, then the advisor is going to do a good job of having your back and helping you figure out how to navigate it and going to the bat for you to help correct the problem. Because admittedly, sometimes when you're the student, you don't necessarily always get listened to, that you've got a problem. Things can be improved with that, yes, but this is where having a really good advisor is also helpful, is that they're going to go to the bat for you to help you if you have a problem. And they're also going to help teach you in that sense, if you want to go into a PhD and you want to be in a university yourself somewhere long-term career-wise. Again, I don't know for sure, because that's the kind of thing here. that you can then, I don't know because you didn't say, um, then you can get a sense of how to navigate that. You can also see what's wrong and, recognize in time things that could be corrected, because I don't think there's any current academic who would not recognize that there's something that they would probably change or something that they think would be a problem. I think one of the things that has come up quite frequently is, for example, the idea of publish or perish, um, being, for promotion, for tenure, you got to crank out X number of articles per year or something of that nonsense. The problem with publish or perish is that it incentivizes quantity over quality, and then you can end up with some really crappy stuff being published. See the American Physical Society article on observing whiteness in introductory physics. That was a crappy article. That was utter crap and never should have been published. My opinion. Obviously, others disagree because it did get published. um, so that's the one thing. I think you're already in the right track that way to be thinking about the advisor, and that's my encouragement to just undergraduate students wanting to go into a STEM grad school path to begin with is think more about the advisor, not just the school. That said, there's not nothing to be thought about at the school because the graduate school applications are fairly uniform in some of the things they will ask. So one of the things you could look for with respect to the school is whether or not, because I don't know actually, I haven't seen this, so I'm kind of curious. Is there now a DEI statement requirement on graduate school applications? If there is, my advice would be to not go there. If only because you can see with some of the rubrics for DEI statements that there's very specific points of view that they want, which they very well not agree with your own. So if you're going to be expressing that honestly, then what have you? That's not going to. They're not going to want you anyway because you don't have that kind of a viewpoint that they want in the DEI statement. And never mind whatever qualifications you may have as a student. And there's been a lot, I think there was a lot of feedback about researching the advisor, and I very much agree with that. Research the advisor. Think about what field you want to go into, because they're going to be your first real mentor in terms of doing research, unless you've been doing research as an undergrad. And then, of course, that mentor is your first real mentor. And it sounds like this particular student has their mentor as an undergrad. That is not always true. Not every student who goes to grad school gets to do research. Gets to do research while they're an undergrad. That's not always common. It's more common depending upon some schools than others, because some schools and some departments obviously have like an undergraduate research course or an undergraduate like thesis project or something like that. That depends on the university and the department. Very different from university to university. So I don't know what that kind of structure is for you. I'm glad that you have a great mentor now. And if your mentor has qualities, here's a way I would suggest about it. If you have a currently good mentor, think about what you like and what you dislike in your mentor currently. And then look for those things that you like and things that could agree with your own personality and disposition in the advisors you are interviewing. And think about it like that, because you're just as much interviewing them as they are interviewing you when you go to do those kinds of things. And do your research on them. Make use of a search engine and start looking up a professor. And more the young professors in particular may have their own Twitter feeds and all this other kind of stuff. Go look at what they're saying. Go take a look at what they're saying online. Go take a look at the kinds of papers they publish. The quality of the papers. Is it a field that you would want to work in? Are they working on things that you might be interested in? And yes, you want to go to grad school. You may not have and it may be in a particular major. Obviously, we don't know. I can't know everybody's major, and I certainly don't know this person's major. But if you're going to grad school and it's a particular major, you may not have a specialization in mind of what you want to work on. So, like, if you're a chem major now, do you know you want to go work on organic chemistry in grad school? Do you know you want to go work on some of those things, or do you want to do textile chemistry, or different kinds of engineering, or air quality versus severe storms? Those kinds of questions. What do you have a sense of what kind of subspecialty you want to go into? Because that's where you start narrowing down advisors too, because some of them will work with that also. The other thing I would recommend is to be very, of course, be very, very thorough. But I didn't see it before. But if you can, talk to the grad students of that potential advisor of yours, the existing grad students, and ask them what they think of their advisor. And ask them in privacy, because obviously it's going to be a little awkward if the grad student is right there. And a lot of times what I found when I was doing this is that a lot of them are okay with the idea of having their students speak to you privately, so that you can ask them all sorts of questions. What do you like? What do you dislike? What about this situation? What about that situation? And you might get a sense from their graduate students as to how they might react to some of your thinking. Your attitude towards science may be off-putting. Well, you know what? I'm not off-put by that. And frankly, I don't know that I would necessarily consider myself ambitious. Competitive, sure. Running a bit more rogue with some of my research, maybe so. Speaking your mind. My thing about this is the question that I would have for you if you were thinking about this. What to you is the purpose of science? And I'm not going to say what I think it is, because that's a question for you to answer, and I don't want to influence you in that direction. Because this is another kind of question in terms of the philosophy of your advisors. If your advisor is more so in the science as activism kind of bent, where they think science is just a tool for societal change or something like that, then that's possibly not going to be in line with you. Thinking about it that way, as on the one hand. Research, think about that philosophy. What do they think science is? Why do they think science is? Make sure you have, and this is going to require you doing some research, because I'm going to take a wager, because I have not seen it in any undergraduate curriculums, which I think is a damn shame now. I haven't seen it done where any undergraduate coursework in STEM fields has offered something of what the philosophy of science is, what the normative principles of science are. What are the 4 normative principles of science? You have communality, meaning scientific knowledge belongs to everybody. Universalism, and its shortest phrase, anybody can do science, so long as they're following process, of course. Disinterestedness, meaning that you are setting your personal things aside and what you would like things to be when you are doing your research. Organized skepticism, you're very open to scrutiny. And a very organized scrutiny with a combination of presentations, peer review, master's defense, thesis and dissertation defense, all that kind of jazz. Very open to lots and lots of scrutiny. And it is one of those things where science can be very tough, because you can get some nasty reviews at times on peer review. It's some of those kinds of things. But that's some of the stuff that I would recommend, and I'm trying not to repeat some of the other commentary, because there is a lot of great commentary in here. And what I had to say with respect to the politics thing, because I did see this, don't speak out openly, avoid talking politics. So that works to a degree. But where it can be a problem is when you're utterly surrounded by people who think differently from you. It can then get very stifling. Actually, and there's different folks I've talked to who've had this experience. So you do need to, of course, be looking for advisors who do have that kind of thing in mind, where they're very much open to folks who have very different beliefs and will not necessarily be punishing you for that. The other thing there is, I've said this a few times, and I've think it's actually quite relevant. Alexander Solzhenitsyn writes this in the Gulag Archipelago. Let the lie come into the world, let it even triumph, but not through me. Even if you say nothing, don't say something that you know you don't believe to be true. When you're dealing with this stuff. And that's, I mean, I've kind of hinted at what I think the purpose of science is in here, and if anybody's watched any of my other videos, you'd know that. But that's some of the things that I recommend. So yeah, you're already this is a letter that's already on the right track. But in my general kind of advice to prospective graduate students is, you are interviewing the advisor just as much as the advisor is interviewing you, because you are talking about working with someone for potentially 5 years or more, and you're talking about at least 2 years alone just on a master's thesis. That's not to say you can't change advisors. I do know folks who have done that plenty of times. Or get your master's thesis in one thing and then go with one advisor rather, and then go to a different advisor for your PhD. That has happened too. So you may end up doing that, although you may have to, of course, how should I put this? Redo all that interviewing that you did of previous advisors if you're going to change advisors. The other thing I would suggest is that you do not necessarily have to go running right into graduate school. Yes, graduate school can absolutely be a goal, and you want to do a PhD, I understand that. But you can also take some time to work in a science field if there's opportunities and internships open for you. And that gives you an opportunity, to go get some experience that you can make use of in graduate school that might actually be very, very appealing to many potential advisors, and as well as to many potential universities that may have you there as a graduate student. But always keep in mind that you're interviewing the advisor just as much as the advisor is interviewing you when you're talking about grad school. And that's where you can get the best possible sense that you can that your potential advisor will be favorable or not. And then, of course, as with any kind of job interviewing thing, go take a look at what they've done. What's the quality of their own work? Where have they been published? What have they published? And, since we're doing more on Twitter and social media with sharing science right now, go look there too. And be prepared. Sometimes you might get a really great offer for grad school, and it might be with a really shitty advisor. So you might find yourself in a situation where you have to turn down a great offer because the advisor's not so great. Though hopefully, everybody figures it out in the interview process that this isn't going to work with you guys. Sometimes that you do, sometimes you don't. And you can get into a place where maybe it's not the best of the offers that you get for grad school, but you can end up with a much better advisor in a much better situation for yourself. So that would be some of my kind of points of advice on navigating grad school in the modern academia. And I don't think you're wrong to be concerned about some of the things of making sure that, your free speech is respected and your academic freedom is respected. I think, having an advisor that will call you out on your own BS, and will be okay with it if you tell him, I think you're wrong and here's why. That is a great thing to have in an advisor too, not just in a mentor, if you can get it. And you're not wrong. Sometimes being nice doesn't cut it. The other thing I would suggest maybe is also, good conflict management kind of things. Because there are going to be times, let us not be fooled that doing a master's or a PhD is stressful enough on its own. And there are probably going to be times where you chew your advisor out. Let's just be frank about that. So, conflict management sometimes is going to be nice to have. But that's my consistent advice in this is understand what your own values are and take it very seriously that you are interviewing your advisor and screening your advisor just as much as your advisor and the university you're interested in will do the same for you. In that way, you can spend a lot of time carefully figuring out, who do I want to work with that's going to help me get toward the specialization that I'm interested in? What are they like? Are they a personality fit for me? Are they going to be okay with somebody who has very, very divergent views, perhaps from them? And you'll find professors like that. Truthfully, you will find professors like that, and that's great when it comes to science. I'm going to tell you that right now. That's great when it comes to science because, frankly, you need very different perspectives and a respect for very different perspectives in science for science to work as it does. Read Jonathan Rauch's Constitution of Knowledge, because he actually explains it really well why that's the case. So keep those things in mind and have a very firm grasp of what your own values are and why, and also an understanding of what you think the purpose of science is. And then I think you'll be able to find an advisor that works really well for you. And that's my generic advice for all the STEM undergrads at this point that are thinking about going to grad school. That's it. Let me know if you happen to be a STEM faculty and you have any other thoughts on advice for this. You can go over to the Heterodox STEM and comment there, which is, of course, linked in the description here, or you can comment below and I will make sure to forward it to them. But that's it for now. Until next time, hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious, everybody.